It's 10 o'clock.
Let's
and
do this.
As the subtitle for our podcast kind of hints there, we're going to start our hour of regret.
Elbow rocket!
Elbow rocket engaged.
Now!
Should we start with our cold open, the story that we got from last night?
Which one are we telling? I forgot.
The restaurant.
All right, so this is we'll start this way because
All right. This is all the background you need for this story.
a lot of podcasts start with what we call a cold open, including ours. And we're going to open a cold open and then kind of explain what that is and then just get started.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Cold opens when you just go straight into a topic without a formal intro or whatever.
Yep.
So we were going to go get food last night. Jim is dressed like this.
Yes.
Anyone raise your hand if you know who he's cosplaying as? Does anyone recognize? A trauma center dude. Do you look like a doctor?
I don't have the demon eyes, so no, I don't think.
Points for being the only person who raised your hand. But
Thank you for that, though. I appreciate the courage. No, I am Tomoko Kuraki from Watamote. If anyone's ever watched Watamote, nobody. That show's not as popular as it should be. Okay,
So we went to a bar and grill.
we were going to
We went to it.
Yeah, we were starving. We'd had a little bit of a problem with the people we were going to go with. But we went to this bar and grill to try and eat some food. We go in the door, and what do we see?
This is like a real bar and grill, not like Applebee's. So you got a bunch of like smoking bikers and tough guys and like people who've been drinking all night, and they just kind of turn and look at this crowd, this like group of like 9 people entering, one of which is him, and we're like, we should not eat here.
I'm just like, oh, I'll come back when I'm wearing pants.
So that's a cold open. That's our cold open.
That's our fun story.
Elbow
About
rocket.
the time I walked into a biker bar wearing a skirt.
Well, the most recent time.
Yeah.
Elbow Rocket is the name of our podcast and also the name of this panel. We're going to talk about podcasting for beginners, parentheses by beginners. We've done this for about a half year, but we've done stuff before podcasting kind of similar.
Yes.
So here's a rundown of what we're going to cover, I guess. We're going to welcome you to this panel and make you feel right at home. We're going to tell you what is a podcast and why is a podcast. Or, sorry, why would you do a podcast?
Why is a podcast?
Why is a podcast? It's a question we all have to ask ourselves every once in a while. What are some of the things to get started? Some basic materials, like actual things you'll need. Some steps you'll need to take. Some things you should definitely not do. We'll talk. This is just a full list here. Things like the premise of your podcast, names, like what's the way to go about that. Your format, regularity. We're not talking about what you eat. Outlet and hosting. We'll talk a lot about that because that's probably the most complicated part about podcasting. Money. What does it cost, if anything, to do a podcast? How can you make money or not? YouTube. We do that as well, so we're going to quickly cover that as well because depending on what kind of podcast you do, we might put it on YouTube. And we will have Q&A at the end for podcasting as well. Then after that, you want to ask us anything that's not inappropriate because we'll just talk about it because the podcast we do, we talk about anime, we talk about video games, we talk about whatever else.
And if you do have anything inappropriate to ask about, you can find me after the panel.
Yes. And then we'll have a wrap-up where Jim sings and scares everyone out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, I'm James. I am the executive producer, writer, editor of the show. And that's Jim. And he just sneaks his way onto the show every episode.
Yeah, I consider myself the villain of the show. I try to sabotage whenever I can, just kind of, interject with random outbursts of things that I know about that nobody else cares about. Things like Journeyman Project, Myst.
Basically, his goal in every
Wing
episode,
Commander.
Every episode, he tries to bring up something that I don't know what that is.
Seinfeld.
I don't care, and I know that the audience doesn't care.
Yeah, but James is also the broadcasting experience of the podcast. I am a teacher. By trade, I teach physics and physical science out in western Kansas. It's an uphill battle sometimes.
Teacher by trade as opposed to teacher by night.
Exactly. No. By night, I am...
So anyway,
But yes.
I'm 23 years old. I've done broadcasting amateurishly since I was 16. I started on YouTube doing various projects, and then I went to school and I studied broadcasting, and then we've been doing this podcast since last year.
Yeah, it's
And-
going pretty well, I think.
And I mean, and we've
All
been
things
friends
considered.
that whole time and done projects as well.
Yeah, we've been friends since high school, so we were familiar with how each other works.
And I just put this in because it's the name of our YouTube channel, unfortunately, but we're not famous or anything. We like to think we are. The name of our YouTube is Famous Quest. It was originally a storyline where we were going to take other people's ideas for YouTube, like very obvious, like famous people, and then we're going to make bad ripoffs in our quest to be famous. And then we decided to stop doing that after 2 episodes. We did hundreds of other videos instead. All right, I guess we'll talk about this thing that's in the name of the panel. What is a podcast?
Is it some kind of vegetable?
It is what it's not, apparently.
Huh.
I wrote down that it's not.
Is it like when you put a bunch of green peas on a fishing line and you just throw it out in the ping?
I'm going to stop you in the middle of that sentence and say no.
Okay.
A podcast is a broadcast. It can be video or audio. It's basically a show. Podcast, by connotation, by the way people think about it, is usually an audio-based thing. It's kind of the internet version of a radio show or radio drama. A podcast does not have to just be a show where guys are talking about a given topic. It can be fiction or nonfiction, prepared, totally written, scripted material. That is, podcast is just basically a format. Kind of like video or movie is a format for delivering a story or content. I put other because kind of similar to Let's Plays, where Let's Plays now is considered a video thing. Let's Plays started as like written material of screenshots, and podcasts kind of have some overlap with when people would just write like a weekly column and stuff, and then they would eventually kind of convert into podcasts. So there's probably other ways that you could do a podcast. Well, I can't think of what they are, so we're not going to talk about them.
No, I don't want to think.
So what are some of the things you should do to get started if you're looking to do a podcast? You should think about, why do you want to do a podcast? Is there something particular that you want to talk about, such as, we loosely talk about games, video games.
Very
us.
loosely. Mm-hmm.
It's important to us that we talk about us.
Yeah.
Not really. But so you want to have like a topic in mind.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
I wasn't here for the beginning, so why is the thing called Elbow Rocket?
Why is it called Elbow
Why are we
Rocket?
called Elbow Rocket?
That's because it's the name of our podcast. The reason that we called it Elbow Rocket is that we started the very brief planning stages around the time that Pacific Rim came out. And we felt that Pacific Rim, a movie that we very much enjoyed, maybe not perfect, but we enjoyed it a lot, captured a lot of the things we were interested in, and that was a catchy catchphrase that captured the spirit of what we were going to talk about, and the kind of, groups of people that we thought might be interested. So
that's where it came from, yeah.
Yes.
And it was shockingly easy to get that opening for the Elbow Rocket.
yes. And
Elbow
we also,
Rocket engaged.
the intro, if you will, this kind of little bite that we have at the beginning is a clip from the movie. And we'll talk about using clips. We'll talk about using music a little bit later on. So know what you're going to talk about, because unless you have a lot of experience doing improvisation, don't. Some basic things you'll need. You'll need a computer or laptop with at least medium specs. Jim, what are medium specs?
Well, medium specs, I would say, would be something like the computer that I have.
Oh, great. Okay, so so just get a computer like Jim's.
Yeah.
Next topic.
That's all. No, a medium spec, I would say, like the one I have, I got it refurbished on Newegg for like $300. It's pretty basic. I want to say,
In terms of
I don't know the specs.
in terms of
really.
numbers, that might actually help people. About 4 gigs of DDR RAM, something along those kind of specs. Going to want to have a decent hard drive on board. You'll probably still eventually need to have an external hard drive, but 500 gigabytes, something like that for a hard drive is a good place to start.
Yes.
Have, I'm not going to name any particular graphics or video cards, but you want to have one that's lets you do multitasking while you're doing something. So like if you're processing a video, if you try and do anything else, it's not going to crash your computer. Or if you're recording something, like I'll just remind you, we're recording everything right now. You're on a podcast. You can also do other things. So we're purposefully a little bit vague, but a starting point to have something just above a cheap computer. Yes, Team Rocket Guy again.
So this is a podcast about podcasts.
Yeah.
You may be onto something here. It's a podcast panel about podcasts while we record our podcast this week, because usually we put them up tonight. Every Saturday, Elbow Rocket to your ears. You'll need internet access for at least one, if not 2 reasons. We don't always we're not always able to record in the same state, so we use Skype, and we'll talk a little bit about that with our process.
Yeah.
We don't mean that like you record and like you hear Skype quality audio. Try not to do that unless you have a guest. That's kind of unavoidable.
Yeah, but
We record locally, but you'll need it if you're gonna, because co-hosting is probably the easiest thing. Putting all the hosting weight on yourself is a lot. Same for Let's Plays. It helps if you have another person to kind of help with the commenting, but you'll need it for if you're going to do it that way, and you're going to need it. You will need it either way when you start hosting and doing the online social media aspect. If you're going to do that as well. I put 5 megabytes per second or somewhere around there, decent broadband as a speed, because mostly, I mean, it'll help for Skype if you're doing that, but mostly if you're sharing files, if you're doing a video podcast, you're having very large files that would potentially take a day if you didn't have a speed around there. So, I mean, that's a pretty obtainable speed. That's like what any internet provider offers now, let alone when Google actually gets around to everyone.
Yeah.
You'll need an out-of-computer microphone. Computers come with microphones. Don't use them. They're terrible. You can use them for casual Skype or something, but when it comes to actually recording it, especially if you're listening to it on headphones, that's terrible quality. They'll get better. They're better than they used to be, but you'll want an independent microphone, something like this, something like this. Yeah,
this right here. I use, this is one I got for Christmas as a gift. I think it was about $100 when we got it. It's probably cheaper now. It's an Audio-Technica AT2020 USB microphone. It's pretty low end, as low end as the higher quality microphones can get, but
I mean, that's basically the bracket.
It works pretty well.
The bracket at least used to be $100 was like the barrier between microphones and like good and great.
Yeah.
I've said this at the beginning of the pre-panel. This is a Rock Band microphone. This comes with a game. It's actually a much more capable microphone than you would think. So play around with what you might have around the house. Just the whole thing is plug it in, record it, and listen to it. If it sounds bad to you, it will sound bad to everyone.
Is it for that prop?
That's the problem.
Yep.
You will need recording software such as Audacity, Audition. Those are the two that I'm most familiar with. We use Audacity because it's free. Audition's also good, but you got to pay for it. I would say that in general, Audacity is better at being a really capable, easy-to-use kind of beginner's tool, and it's capable of having like lots of tools and stuff too, or not tools, but layers, so you can stack it really well. It doesn't have a ton of effects, but it works fine, whereas Audition is much more in-depth in terms of like you can do this and that with your sound quality. You can put these effects. You can sound like you're on a telephone or all that.
Yeah, like if you were doing like a drama, like scripted kind of podcast, I might recommend procuring
Audition would be a better choice for that.
Because it can do all the different vocal filters and stuff. I played around with sound engineering a little bit on my copy of Audition that I bought.
That's subtle.
Yeah.
Some more things you might need. These are based on kind of the format of the podcast you're going for. But usually you're going to have a few mic peripherals. You're going to need like a spit guard, or what was the other one?
It pretty much means the same thing. It's like a pop. They call it a pop filter. You can call it a spit guard. It's pretty much a loop with kind of a mesh around it, and that catches a little bit of the gunk that comes out of your mouth sometimes when you're on a roll and talking about something. And it can also softens the plosive sounds, the
certain syllables.
Bees.
Yeah, I like to think the phrase "mind your P's and Q's" was in regards to voice acting, even though it wasn't.
Yeah,
because there's sounds that will go over the pitch that most microphones are comfortable with, and that will distort your sound for those loud noises.
Yeah, you want to be really careful about that, because if you don't, you're going to sound like an Atlas game from 2005 with all this just air blowing into the microphone all over the place, and it just does not sound
Not even 2005,
attractive.
Up until Persona 4.
More or less, yeah.
Love those games, but they didn't fix that issue until about 2008.
I want to say, yeah.
You will probably need additional file storage eventually. For example, like we after we finish a podcast, we delete all our source files pretty much once we're done, and we just keep our base files. But those add up. Where a 1-hour podcast, you do that once a week for 10 weeks, so not even 3 months, and you already have a little over half a gig. And again, like we were talking about hard drives earlier, there are 500 gigs. It just, like, all that stuff will add up, especially if you have any kind of video projects as well.
Yeah.
Video podcasts, you're going to need a decent hard drive. If you're doing a thing with a partner or having guests, where they are not at your location you're recording. You're going to need Skype or Google Hangout. Skype is probably the preferred biggest one that most people have. Google Hangout has some options. If you have more than like 2 or 3 people, sometimes that's a better option. For
Yeah,
free.
we tried Google Hangout. It did not like us very much.
I think it just doesn't like where you live.
Well, nobody does, but
Yeah. You will probably need additional editing software. For example, we talked about if you had Audacity, but you didn't have Audition, you might need both. If you're doing video, you're going to need some editing software.
yeah. And you'll have to look around because the Windows Movie Maker that comes with
Yeah, this
8.
is Windows 8 I have on here. The Movie Maker on here is terrible. Go and find the one that came with Windows XP or Vista. That's the best Movie Maker. I've tried all of them because Movie Maker's free.
Yeah,
So
I've
I
looked
can
for
say
some.
that
I've looked for
experience.
some like video editing alternatives that you could use for that's like free. A lot of them. There's one that's really good, but it's really user unfriendly, so I wouldn't recommend it. It's just there's a lot of. I think Windows Movie Maker is probably the most user friendly one that you can
In
find.
terms of when you're looking for software online, try and stick to established brands because that is one of the things that terrible people online are like, people are going to look for this. I'm going to make this into spam and viruses. So try and stick to a video or audio software that you've kind of heard of and download from a reputable site. A lot of them you're downloading from adobe.com or whatever their website is they either have a free trial or you're downloading the free thing from their site. So be careful in that. If you're going to do the social media, which if you want people to listen to your thing, you're going to need to do that a little bit. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. accounts.
I'm guilty of being awful about not promoting this, so
Yeah.
yeah.
And you'll need podcasting, hosting website accounts. We'll talk about that with hosting. So what's in a name? A lot. We talked about how ours came about, and it's, for better or worse, it's probably one of the better names we picked because
yes.
over the years we've gone through a couple YouTube accounts with mostly terrible names. I
Yes.
think.
I would agree.
Even the YouTube we use right now, I think Famous Quest is a pretty terrible name, but a great YouTube you should all go to later tonight. Yeah, my original account was Shiitake Mushroom Ninja. That's a great name. So
What are you talking about, dude? Kingdom Hearts was awesome.
Kingdom Hearts. He's talking about one of the first videos I did in like 2007. So how often are you going to do the podcast, and how long is each episode going to average? And the reason that we bring this up almost as the first things in terms of planning here is that you want to stick to something that you will maintain, because you will, if you start building even a few people who are listening, you start making like, oh, this is only half an episode, or this is supposed to be weekly or monthly, and it's been 3 months, you will lose people almost immediately. And that's always been one of our priorities with the podcast, is we stuck to an hour, and we've gone anywhere from 50-something minutes to an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah. And
But every week.
Yeah, and what I find the most helpful is kind of stick to a set length and regularity you want to stick to, and then never deviate from that. So pick something and stick with it. There's a podcast that I was very fond of for a long time that I was following. It's called the Second Funniest Podcast. It's by a comedian named Justin Worsham and a man named Kevin Miller, who does the voice of Sly Cooper in the Sly series. And they were an hour podcast every week, never missed a beat for like 4 or 5 years. Then they switched over to a 30-minute podcast twice a week. And they did that for about a year, and then they switched back, and they've had maybe 4 episodes in the last 6 months. So I think like the kiss of death is getting too fancy pants with your what you want to do with your timing. You want to just stick to what you know and stick to what works, really.
Yeah.
So just like Congress, don't ever change.
And to be really timely, look at what happened to Equals 3. I'm just kidding. He chose to end that. So you're choosing a format, video or audio. Depending on your length, you might want to have an intermission. And I'm using intermission like in the traditional sense, like if you have a long podcast, you think people are going to listen for a certain length, they might want to break it up. So you have a little break in between, which might be a sound bit, it might be music. Or alternatively, if you're going to have a really well segmented show, you might have intermissions in between segments. You know, after the casual talk. A regular segment, you might have something.
Yeah, and if you want to do it, you like maybe little bumpers before each segment. That'd be
Bumper is probably the better word.
Yeah.
Is this where we talk about music? We'll go ahead and talk about music. You want to be careful when you're pulling material because depending on where you put it, you're going to get scrutiny. Because if you didn't create it, there's the whole copyright infringement thing. YouTube especially is going to be your worst enemy at this because they have software where they can sample it, and it's like they look at like 1 second. It's like this has the exact same sound pitch as insert source file, so they instantly know you're using Hatsune Miku music. They don't even have to have a person look at it. And they will just automatically do something to your video.
And it used to work that you could just like invert the file or something and use like some kind of trick to trick YouTube into thinking that you didn't have something. That does not work anymore. They figured that out pretty fast.
So basically what we're trying to say is...
so playing around with the waveforms won't work anymore.
Do some research into the definition of fair use, but in general, taking a small amount of a video clip or music clip, 15 seconds, you want to be, you want to be careful of this. They kind of word it where it's like, don't take the most important part of it. But you can use a small amount in the right context. And that like, we're saying this is a possibility. We're not endorsing for you to take music necessarily. Yeah. It's an option if you're careful, but it also is not perfect because fair use is still something that's being constantly redefined right now. Yeah,
and again, just be reasonable about it also for your listeners' sake. There's another podcast I listened to for a while until the guy I liked left it. It was called Radiodrome, and there was one episode of it where the outro music for that episode was Freebird. The song Freebird, that's a 10-minute song. The whole thing was the outro.
And I also talked about
and that's just
picking way too like famous a song.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Sorry.
I was saying like maybe some way to actually kind of get around the whole copyright issue is basically open up the ability for folks outside to say like, are you interested in submitting music for
absolutely
segments? So I don't know if this is going to pick up on the podcast, but basically he's talking about if you don't want to use copyright music, first chance you get, see if someone will help contribute and give you music that either they created or edited in a way that's theirs or for your podcast. Make original content. And if you can do that, that would definitely be preferred, especially if you can make an original opening that then becomes something where like people hear that and they say, oh, that's the Elbow Rocket podcast. I recognize their jingle, which we don't have. That's a great idea. And,
I hummed for like 2.5 minutes.
I cut most of that
and
out.
You cut most of that out, and I thought that would have been a fantastic jingle. You just
talked about you were mad that they put music in for 10 minutes. That was Freebird.
Well, it's different when I'm singing it.
To you for 2 minutes?
I have a lovely voice.
Next topic.
How dare you?
How do we do a typical show? I put a static image here. This is Audacity. This is the end of actually a finished file. This was last week's episode 21, and this is what it will look like in Audacity. This is only 3 layers, so it's not that complex to show. Top row is my file recorded locally on my microphone. That's his in the middle, which he records locally, and then he sends via Google Drive, and then I put it in and edit it and time in everything.
Google Drive is a godsend for stuff like this because they're too big to email, but you can put MP3s on Google Drive and email them the link, and you can keep it private. No one else is going to break in and take it, and it's wonderful.
And you'll see right here is the music for our outro, and you can kind of see like this is underlaced underneath what we're talking to. You can't really hear it. It's kind of just a build up, and then this is the actual music we use, which is about 15 seconds. I try and keep to that pretty closely. But that's like an example of how we're doing it right now. And if you want to know what song that was, I guess you'll have to listen to 21. It was Kesanai, though.
Yeah.
What's the full title? Kasanai Sumi?
Kasanai Sumi, yeah, from Full Metal
Kasanai
Alchemist.
Sumi
Or as
Full
you
Metal
called it,
Alchemist.
like...
Shut up.
Kesanami Sugumi.
I don't know how to spell. This is a slide with no pictures. Outlet and hosting. Where are we putting this? So you've recorded this podcast. Let's say you've got it edited. You have a 60-ish megabyte sound file if you've done about an hour. So what are you going to do with this file? Who's going to host it? iTunes is not a host. iTunes is a mirror, really, an RSS feed, essentially. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to put it on a site whose purpose is to host files, and a lot of them want money in exchange for that, which is probably fair. So how much can you do for free? Because there are some hosts where you can have a certain amount hosted for free, and what are some cheaper hosts? So those, we're a small podcast, so that's what we looked at was what is free and what is really cheap. We are not sponsored or endorsed by these. These are the ones that we've used. We've had a good experience so far. First example, podbean.com. This is the one that we recently went to, and you can see at the bottom here, these are the cheaper options. But basically, depending on your frequency of how much you're putting up a month, you'll know how much space you're going to need a month. For Podbean, what they do is you pay per how much you want to put up a month. So if it's January 1st through January 31st, you're going to have 100 megabytes you're going to need. Then in February, it resets. You get another 100 megabytes. And so on and so forth. You pay more, you get more space.
And it keeps the files, too. It doesn't just
Yes.
bump off all the 100 megabytes you have and then, okay, here's your new 100 megabytes.
Yeah, so I mean, it keeps all your content, but you can just put up X amount per month. We use the second cheapest one because that's what works for a weekly podcast of about an hour a week. The other one, the one that we started with is, it was one of two that we started with, is Podomatic. I believe it's podomatic.com. And the free option for that, which is pretty nice, is you get free 500 megabyte total storage. That does not reset per month. That means when you hit 500 megabytes, it will ask you to pay them money, and otherwise you'll have to delete older files to put up new files, which is what we do for that one. You'll notice that there's kind of a price range here. Like, why would I just say 3 to 5? Why don't I just say the price? $3 a month is like the average if you pay for like a whole year in advance, and like $5 a month is if you go per month. So that's what that little discrepancy is there. The next step up, which is a lot more storage, is 2 gigabytes. You want to pay $10 a month, $100 a year. So those are two examples of kind of the pricing structure and roughly the price you can expect. But again, if you're just getting started, maybe you don't even know if this is going to be a lasting thing, but you want to try it out, go with one like Podomatic where it's free to go up to a certain amount, get a couple episodes out and see if this is something you're going to maintain, something you're into, and then from there you can decide, like, am I willing to put a few dollars into this, etc.
Yeah, and I think Podomatic is what we still update the Podomatic one because
Yes.
I think it's the easiest one we found to work with the iTunes feed.
Yeah, the one we don't update is
Podcast Garden.
Podcast Garden is another free one, which we're bringing up only to talk badly a little bit about, because you can only put up like one file a month for free. You can put up 12 a year, I guess. If you did a monthly podcast, I guess Podcast Garden is a decent one. So iTunes, I mentioned that they don't host. So what do they do for you, and how does iTunes work in terms of podcasts? It's an RSS feed in general, and for those not familiar with the term,
Good question.
go ahead.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Don't worry about it.
I catch you earlier. With Podbean and Podomatic, have you guys had any streaming issues? I know ISPs are starting to like throttle down YouTube. Is that happening anywhere else?
So the question is, with those hosts that we mentioned, have we had any issues with the streaming or streaming-related issues? That's a good question because I was going to bring this up. So I went to Podomatic first as my RSS, basically the thing that iTunes is going to read for subscribers. I went to Podomatic and I put that in. So we're on iTunes, by the way. Just look up Elbow Rocket under podcasts and subscribe. And you can find us there. But basically, that's still pulling from Podomatic, even though we've also started going to Podbean because I can't get Podbean to do that correctly. So I don't know if that's just a personal issue that I have. That sounds like a medical issue.
Yeah.
But
Maybe make pills for that.
Podbean might have an issue with iTunes RSS feed, which is actually a decent thing to bring up. So I'm glad you mentioned that. In terms of, have either of those sites at any point where I've tested or tried to listen to something, have they not worked? No, they've been fine. Because you can listen to them on these sites as well, so they don't just go to iTunes or whatever. They also will. You can direct someone to the website and they can listen there.
Yeah. But in terms of streaming, it's like I haven't had any huge problems with it just listening to it because I live in Western Kansas with pretty basic AT&T internet, and I have been able to listen to it. I listen to it every weekend because I'm a complete narcissist, so I have to hear I have to hear the sound of my voice. I listen to it and I have no problems with
He
it.
wants to make sure I don't edit it to make him sound worse than usual. White shirt. SoundCloud. That's another good one to bring up because when I had made a website for myself, like I made a professional website for broadcasting, so I put up a few little bitty tiny files that were voice and radio demos, and I used that service. And I went back to look at that when I started making the website for the podcast. SoundCloud is actually pretty expensive for the larger amounts of storage. So it's a great resource for like if you're going to host some small files for like a website, like for something like my uses I just described. In terms of hosting a podcast, I think it's cost prohibitive. At least that's how I felt about it. I looked at it about a week or two ago, so that was my experience. That might change in the future, but their current pricing structure is not as great as, in my opinion, as the ones that we talked about. So this is hey look, it's Elbow Rocket, a podcast you can look up later. So this is what it looks like if someone looks up your podcast that you've put on, that you've linked to the RSS feed. The process for that, by the way, is to go onto the iTunes store once you have hosted it somewhere. I'm going to knock over my water. Once you've hosted it somewhere, you can... I'm also going to check the time. Okay, we're good. You will go to the iTunes store and go to the podcast section, and there'll be a button right on the right that says Submit a Podcast. And that will walk you through the process of setting up the RSS feed. So if you have it on whateverwebsite.com, then you can set it through iTunes. So that's, again, go to the iTunes store and then submit a podcast. And that's what it'll look like once it's displayed. The one next to us is the Elbow Podcast. Do not get it confused with ours. It's probably fine, but it's not ours. And then this is what it looks like. These are podcasts I subscribe to. I'm on there twice because of the two that we use. This is what it'll look like for your subscribers once they'll automatically get an episode however often you put it up. So that's kind of how it looks like. It'll display there for them. And that's the benefit of the RSS feed is they don't have to go to your website. They don't have that additional entry point where they have to work to get the new content. And that way you'll have more likely a larger viewership because they don't have to do anything.
People love not doing stuff.
Yep.
I teach science in Western Kansas, I would know.
I would say that's how YouTube subscribers, that whole thing works, but YouTube seems to prohibitively make it so it's harder and harder to find what you subscribe to and not just what videos they want you to watch.
Yeah, YouTube will be making an appearance a little bit later, too.
Money, costs, and how you can make money. Probably not. So we talked about hosting. That's going to be probably your primary expense if you don't already have equipment. Again, microphones can range greatly in cost, but I would say anywhere from $20 to $120.
Yeah. You should really not have to pay more than $100 or so for a decent microphone for this. Because again, this one, even when I got it, was still pretty cheap.
And what is the name of that? Why don't we just,
again,
as an example?
Again, it's an Audio-Technica AT2020 USB microphone. This is not at all the latest model. I got this in like 2010, but it still works fantastically for my purposes. I use it every week. You want to kind of describe
how this one differs? Like these point directly at us. What kind of microphone is this?
This is what they call a condenser microphone. I'm not what you'd call a sound engineer, but... as far as I know, it's pretty nice. Their build right there. I'm not a tech guy, so I don't know all the super cool specs. But
it's different from like a shotgun mic where you have to point it directly at the source, whereas this can capture one or two people in a closed environment.
It's not exactly omnidirectional, but it can capture you from a wider range of positions and distances.
So we bring that up because depending on your needs, you might need X brand or Y brand, but also a different kind of mic.
But yeah, depending on what you're doing too, like this one's pretty good because I have a computer desk. It's pretty much chest level, but you might need a stand for something like this because this one only comes with this little tiny tripod right here.
Oh, that gives me an opportunity to the slide that didn't have a picture. I was gonna have a picture of my really professional setup, which is this microphone taped to that tripod, which is made for video cameras and not microphones. Micro microphones. But yeah, and it's even decent enough you can attach the pop filter or the spit guard to it. So it's a pretty good microphone, and it's not super expensive as far as mics go. Another thing you might need is a mic stand or a modified mic stand based on your setup. So those are your two main costs, and some ways that you can either make money or help with your costs, which is where we're kind of at, is you can use crowdsourcing. Everyone's heard of Kickstarter. Kickstarter is a lot harder now to be successful on because there's so much competition, as well as Kickstarter has they take a large percentage. It's like 20 or 30%. Indiegogo is a pretty good alternative, and it's a lot more like small project friendly. So Indiegogo.com is a good one. They take less money. They also have an option where you still make however much money you raise. So like if you don't make X goal, you still get whatever you got, and you can do what you can with it, which is what we did.
Which helped us immensely.
Yeah, for ours, like we did Indiegogo to help us pay for server costs for this year, basically. So that's what we did. That's one thing you can do. Ad revenue is basically putting on your website, like your host, or like your actual website where people will be directed to. Something like Google AdSense. For YouTube, which we'll talk briefly about. The ads on the videos that everyone loves to skip. Those are ways you can arguably make money or cover costs, and sponsorships, which is if you're fortunate enough to find someone who wants to talk about something or have you talk about something, and they'll pay you a little bit or help sponsor a little bit your costs. You can say, hey, Hulu is a great website or something, and then Hulu sponsors you. We're not.
We're not.
We're not Hulu caliber.
I
so
think
that's not
our,
us.
I mean, our sponsor was a Harvest Moon forum.
Yeah,
and
but
that
it
was nice. It was fun.
Yeah, it was Indiegogo related.
Yep.
So those are kind of the few things that podcasts are usually run using. YouTube, a little bit. I mean, this is podcasting, so YouTube's not our big thing here, but we've done YouTube a lot, and there's a little bit of overlap if you're doing a video podcast, where a lot of times I think those are more common than you might think because vlogs or video blogs are basically video podcasts.
Yeah, I would say so.
Those are a lot of those, especially some of the big people do, a video every week where they're just like, hey, I'm talking about candy or talking about what's going on in the last week for me. That's basically a video podcast, so it's a lot on YouTube.
Yeah, and some of them are literally like audio podcasts. They just put the video feed on there.
Yes.
So.
YouTube's free hosting, but subject to additional scrutiny. We talked about the music copyright infringement thing. If you put that on some host or something, it's a lot less likely that someone's going to give you trouble right away than YouTube, which is mostly built around that now.
Yeah, and I think another problem with it was there was a time when YouTube was a great what?
No, I was laughing at
Sorry.
basically.
Sorry. YouTube was a great way, I think, to get your profile out there early on, but I think it's reached a point where it's kind of like the cool kids table is where YouTube's at, and if you're not like with that, if you're not like a Rooster Teeth or a Two Best Friends or something like that, it's like you can get your stuff out there, but it's like you don't really exist.
Yeah, and that's what the second line there is. You will likely get lost in the competition. YouTube is a really fierce ground right now. That makes it sound like Hunger Games. It's not that exciting. But basically, there's a lot of people on YouTube. There's a lot of people who have gone from being a viewer to a contributor. And so you have a lot of people fighting for viewership, subscribers, and money. So we don't put our podcasts on YouTube because video files, even if we just had our audio file, but we put a static image or something, it becomes a video file, which are a lot larger, and that's a big time investment that we just don't think is going to be worth it for what we're doing right now. But we do have a YouTube where we put Let's Plays and video reviews, so that's youtube.com/user/famousquest.
Shameless plugs.
Shameless plugs. There probably won't be more later. You can make money via ad revenue on your YouTube videos. You probably won't. The reason I say that is that it's a very high entry level. You have to have so many, I can't really say, but X amount of thousands of views per dollar, and you have to make X amount of dollars before you actually make any money. So we, for instance, we've been doing that YouTube for a year and a half and have not yet made money.
Yeah.
And this is a comic I found yesterday that I feel kind of captures what YouTube's at right now. Hey, look, it's my content. Hey, look, no one cares. That's not saying that you can't make a step in there.
No. It's just you got to work. You got to work really hard. You got to make it your thing, and that's not where my time commitment's at right now.
Yeah.
I feel like instead of this, there should be that meme that says, "Hey, this guy has a Let's Play. See, no one cares."
Yeah.
That's a good one. Basically, the best way to counter that is don't do a video, don't do a series, don't do a podcast that is exactly like someone else, or don't do your version of something else. Don't do your Game Grumps, don't do your, ex video game journalist podcast. Don't do that. Do
and
your version.
We are two best friends, but we're not two best friends.
I can't even cover that.
Cricket.
That's what our YouTube looks like.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to be using images for our stuff, but this is actually like social media discussion. It's not just shameless plugs. But we do have a Facebook. It's right there, and you can like it and follow it. Social media, Facebook's a really easy one. You can create a page pretty easily, and from there it's a really easy blend into your existing friends and stuff who will probably be nicer and more open to looking at your stuff than complete strangers, and especially if you want to get comments and feedback. So make a Facebook page of your project.
And also, your friends have other friends of their own, so they can also, if they like your stuff, share it with those friends, and then it becomes a whole giant, sweet, sweet trickle-down pie of good sharingness.
I'm very proud of this banner image that has 1, 2, 3 Nicolas Cages. This is our Twitter. It's another good resource. It basically, you have to get followers for it to be worth anything, but it's somewhere where you can have a lot of hashtags, which is just, internet tags. It's people looking for this phrase will then find your thing, and from there they'll hopefully look at your links. So that's kind of that's the setup of kind of how I've done the last couple tweets in terms of publicizing what I've put out.
Yeah, and it all boils down to just be powerful, assertive, and promote. Just get your stuff out there and be sharing constantly, like I don't do, but you do. You do a very fine job of that.
Yeah, I do most of the work. I just want to point out that at Jim's recommendation, I did tag Travis Willingham into the tweet about our episode called Travis Willingham is Our Opening Act. This is our website. This is done on Wix. That's just one of a couple free websites that I've used in the past, and it's pretty good. So that's what our front page looks like, and I've just kind of put a couple examples of, if you're doing a podcast, some things you might want to put up or how you might want to set it up. First off, put your name of your thing a couple times, and then like a brief summary of what it is. So that really doesn't say what it is. It just says it's an hour every week. But that's part of it. That's kind of our promise. We're saying this is what we're going to do every week. You'll see at the top kind of the links of what our basic website right now has. It's the homepage, what we are, a schedule. It's good to have a schedule of like upcoming things for people to check back on, and then they'll be like, oh, this is actually updates, so I like this, and I have something I'm looking forward to in the future. And the archives, the episodes, that's our links to all the episodes in our sites that we put our episodes on.
Yep. Now, I feel like, should we describe Wix for them in terms of what the website can do, what the hosting can do for them in terms of making a website?
I mean, it's a website host. It's free unless you want the nice options. I'm not going to go into super detail on it. Like there are some other sites you might be familiar with, like WordPress and stuff, which are more built for blogs. They're not meant for links and content hosting. So the one thing I will mention of Wix.com, because you'll see on our business cards when you grab one, is that we have a kind of a terrible URL, which is that you can buy a website domain, which means you buy www.jaredsthing.com. You buy that specific URL. I mean, and that costs a little bit of money. It's not that much, though. But Wix has this thing. It's like you have to have a premium account to use your domain, and their premium account is like $60. So that's a barrier that we're not doing right now. So that's why we have a URL that is our usernames .wix.com/the name of our thing. Yes.
Monthly or yearly?
That is yearly, but that was like $75 just total, just to change the name of our site to what we want. And so we want to spend about $75-$80 a year to host, which is our primary thing. So it's like if you have the money to do that and you have the dedication to it, then it's probably worth it. Or you can go to a site that has cheaper domain naming, but for Wix, that's a weird, expensive thing. And then we also, our last link, which is a very important one, the Q&A/contact thing. Just put up all your links where they can email you, because you want to have people ask questions or interact with your show. Just always have something that people can get a hold of you, basically, and be a part of the community if you can get one. And this is our thumbnail. You have to have a very specific thumbnail size for iTunes, and that's what it is. It's like 1440 by 1440, I think.
Yeah.
That's Princess Mononoke. No, she has blood on her face. That's a still image from the movie. Casual.
And mine is yet again another thing that only I like.
What's that, Jim?
That would be Erica, aka Cure Marine from Heart Catch Pretty Cure.
And that's a picture of both of us. So they get the premise that there's two guys talking about nerdy things. That's me talking about horror movies, by the way, if you're wondering what I'm holding. Horror, 2 syllables. All right, so that covers generally what we want to talk about, but we've still got plenty of minutes. If anyone has any additional questions about podcasting, we'll have, right after we get through these questions, we'll have any question you want to ask us, basically, that's not inappropriate, because we're just doing the podcast.
Fire away.
What would you recommend as being your intro and or outro, just content-wise?
Basically, the way that we do the intro, we talked about the cold open. The way that we do is once we've set up we've set up our Skype conversation so we can hear each other. We're both recording locally. We just kind of talk. We're good. Okay. I just checked it. Believe me. Mm-hmm. We just kind of talk just so that we get into, you don't have the nervousness or anything. Because sometimes you will, because you realize people will listen to this and stuff, or you want to do a reset or something. But basically just kind of get into the groove. It will probably be stuff that you'll edit out later. But just start talking about something. maybe it's like, oh, hey, whether, I mean, it helps that we have a co-host to bounce back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
But start talking about something, and then ease your way basically into the podcast, and then at whatever point you feel is a good point to actually start the show that people will listen to, start there.
Gotcha. And did you also specifically mean like intro music and something like that, like an eye catch almost?
As in the point where the video starts, your introduction and then your outroduction, beginning and end of the podcast.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so I guess the other thing I'll add then is that at some point, once you get through just kind of the casual open there, is just greet people as if, for some of them, this is going to be their first time that they listen to it, whether it's episode 22 or 1. So there'll be some new people, so they're like, hey, welcome to Elbow Rockets, this podcast where we talk about animes and video games and our dumb lives. And then not too much, because you don't want to be like a kid's book series where it's like every book you have to retread everything that's happened. But yeah, that's a good thing, just to catch people and be like, hey, this is what you're going to be listening to. And they'll be like, okay, cool. We're going to talk about that.
Because I do have an intro and outro for my videos.
Yeah. Oh, I would also say for videos,
Really short.
I would also say for
Oh, yeah.
video intros, keep them relatively short, because especially the anime
Yeah.
community, where it's like, hey, this is my project, this is the name of my production. It's like 35 seconds before the video. Everyone has probably left before that's over.
Yeah, my intro is about 3 seconds. My outro is about a second.
That's great.
Perfect.
Also, outro is a great time, or intro too. Sometimes it's a great time, like as you're kind of introducing, put like little supers, which is subtitle basically, of your Twitter or Facebook or something, wherever you're going to interact with people. Just put that casually at the beginning or end when you get it started, and so people is like, hey, if I wanted to ask them a question or have this on a future thing, then they have that at the beginning and outro. You next, and then you.
Sorry if you covered this at the beginning before I got here, but do you have any recommendations on promotion at the very beginning of the Swollen project?
We, by and large, used Facebook and social media.
Yes.
For our friends, at least. We try to get the word out to our friends. I was involved in a few forums at the time. I tried to put some stuff out on there as well. So it's mostly, if you're like just beginning, like this is your first time at bat. Mostly it's going to be people either in person or through online communities that you interact in.
Yeah. A great thing is, we mentioned like 4 of them for a reason, is don't just use one. Try and use as many as you think you'll maintain. I don't put a tweet out for every video I put up, because I put up like 380 videos, but I do put up one for every podcast. But just, whatever you're going to maintain, try and do as much as you can, because that way you'll have that many opportunities, basically. And then, don't be shy on it, basically. If it comes up in conversation, you're like, hey, I do a thing and it's here. And then, if they're inclined, they'll go and do it. That covers that. So,
Yeah.
Green hair again.
You may have covered this earlier. I'm not gonna lie. I'm really just here for the next panel after this.
That's okay. Or somebody's opening act.
But I do
Yep.
have an interest in recording, not so much podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
Recording what kind of thing?
Like cover music.
Okay.
Okay.
Possibly doing my own voice acting. I'd love to be a voice actor one day. But
Well.
that's a pipe dream.
I was going to say, I can summarize
We'll talk
everything,
later.
everything I've ever learned about voice acting from the panels I've gone to.
Yeah.
Don't live in the Midwest, and
Anyway, that's not my question. My question is, do
Just
you
being
have,
honest.
Do you have a preference on brand of mic, like to get like Blue Yeti or something?
A lot of people, what I find, a lot of people recommend the Snowball mics. Those are reasonably inexpensive. But again, I'm personally very fond of Audio-Technica. I think they make fine products for a pretty reasonable price.
that's a brand that I've heard a lot of good stuff
Yeah.
about.
I have a mic that I got at Nebraska Furniture Mart for about $8. It's just a stick mic, and it's got a little bit of an audio blocker for outside sources. The
Okay.
quality on this thing is amazing, and you only paid $8 for it.
And that kind of,
Nebraska Furniture Mart.
yeah, and that's one of the things I was talking about at the beginning, where it's like you may find some weird microphone at your house, and you're like, that's a piece of crap that I could not possibly use. Plug it in and try it. Your ears will know. Or hopefully somebody you have an immediate connection with will know.
Absolutely. Yes, friend from last night.
Well, at least from experience, especially listening to a bunch of it, you really got that it's good. You got to worry about sound quality overall, whether it's from figure out if it's from your microphone or from your mixing or any post production, because nothing turns off people faster than like really loud grating kind of noise in the back of the recording.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Which also being said, don't use don't use gaming microphones on headsets. That has worked very poorly for a lot of people.
So to summarize that, be careful of all your background noise. There will be some things you won't think of that you might do your whole run, and then you'll say, oh, why does this sound terrible? Make sure you don't have a fan running in the background. Make sure you don't have a dishwasher running in the background if it's near your room. Unless like it's on purpose for something you're doing, turn off any like cell phone or television or just any distraction or something that's going to mess with the sound quality. Do it a couple test runs for more than like 5 seconds. Do like a half minute where you do different pitches or different parts of your show just real quick, and make sure that it all sounds good.
And for the love of God, remember to plug in your headphones.
Yes, especially if you're doing, I don't know, a Skype podcast. You don't want that feedback, right, Jim?
You sure don't.
You don't.
Well, thanks, James. No, you don't.
Now everyone knows. Team Rocket.
Another thing, say you were recording it. You want to get rid of the echoing sound from you recording it. You want to like dampen the sound bouncing off like the walls too.
You can't. I don't do a whole lot of like
Don't do a whole lot of any.
My house is a rental. I can't do a whole lot of modification to it. I usually I record. It's probably the worst place you could record anywhere. I record like in the corner of my room, and there's echo bouncing all
I
around.
think what you're asking, the easiest thing is basically any problem you might think will be there by the time you record, see if you can solve that ahead of time, because if it's avoidable, it's always easier than trying to edit it out. So for instance, echo, try and avoid a place that has a bunch of open walls that don't have anything on the walls, because that's going to create the echo. In terms of trying to fix it afterwards, it is possible. Of the two editing softwares I mentioned, it's going to be a lot easier with Audition just because of the options. It is a lot of work to fix though. So again, listen to yourself at the beginning, and if you have to rearrange your setup, do that. Because you'll say like, I want to move stuff for 15 minutes. It's like, or you could fix an hour-long messed up echo file, which could take 6 hours. Do you have a follow-up on that?
Did we misunderstand the question?
Instead of modifying the house, could you just like stack luggage containers?
Yeah, and then, I mean, when
That's
I
true.
say setup, I just mean like whether it's a desk, whether you're sitting in front of a table. I just use setup as basically your space that's going to be picked up that you're using. So you could modify your immediate surroundings in a way that would be beneficial.
Yeah, sorry. By modifying, I actually did mean like buying the anechoic soundproofing material that you can line the walls with. Yeah, but what I'm thinking about doing when I get back home is you can do simple things like I have an extra comforter for my bed that I'm planning on like hanging up in the wall behind my computer desk. That'll dampen just a little bit. It's a nice little plush down comforter. Those work wonders, and I'm experimenting with some things to come.
White shirt, and then we'll come back to you.
Ryan Brushwood once told me that the best thing you can do for a podcast is you find a niche and then fill it.
Yes.
How would you guys recommend to assess the kind of the niches out there and see if it's already been done?
So looking at niche, which is a great thing to fit in, because all of the big obvious big groups have probably already been done on YouTube, on podcasts. So start with what you enjoy. Don't fake it. So pick something you enjoy, something you're passionate about, and then maybe look at a subcomponent of that that's not been done. Look at some of the avenues that you already listen to. So if you already watch stuff on YouTube, maybe you're thinking of doing YouTube, see what other people are doing. Don't do exactly that. See what's not there. If it's like, let's say you're big into Devil May Cry, and like there's not a channel focused on talking about the backstory or something, it's like that's something you could do instead of just being another person putting gameplay footage. So I mean that's just a random example, but start with what you're interested in, and then find an aspect of that you can do that no one else is doing. Don't have competition, and then everyone will have to go to you because you're the guy talking about Devil May Cry background.
One new development that I found out is the introduction of Patreon. I don't know if you've heard of it yet.
I don't know much about that.
I have not.
Basically, instead of having to go to instead of having to fund a Kickstarter every month to try and pay for things, it gives folks the ability to basically sign up for a recurring donation.
Okay, I have heard of this. I just didn't remember the name.
But one thing, especially whether you're doing like any kind of crowdsourcing kinds of things, people, at least a lot of successful sort of ones, are looking for what else can you give for people that give more money, that are looking for higher ones. When you're doing something in this vein, is there what can really be done besides, like, I think one podcast says if you donate more, you'll get a special personalized thank you from our main character.
So he's talking about Patreon, which is an alternative Kickstarter, alternative Indiegogo, where instead of just having like a flat donation, then you might get a perk or something. And we'll talk about I'll talk briefly about some of the perks that we did for ours. Patreon is like, they basically say, hey, I'll give you $10 every month as long as your thing's going along okay. So it's kind of like a sponsorship, but it's done through a Kickstarter-esque website. Excuse me. Some of the things that we did for our rewards was one of them was we basically struck a sponsorship with someone who went through that, and that was the one that he had mentioned. Another one we had was, some of the options we had was like, you can pick the music as long as it's not, swear. You can ask us questions that we would answer. We do that anyway. We were trying to trick people. It didn't work. You can, we were going to have some guests on the show, some people we're going to talk with on Skype. We're going to talk about whatever they want. In that case, we're going to talk about Metal Gear Solid because that's what they're into. So you can have guests on your show, and then have them kind of give them a little bit of control, but basically give them additional opportunities for your community to be involved that they wouldn't ordinarily be involved in. Yeah.
And we had an upper level one that was we'll be their guest, whatever thing, where we supposedly in the works with a couple of friends of mine from that forum I was talking about. We're supposedly they donated a certain amount of money, so we agreed to be part of a Terraria live stream with them.
Yeah, we're still waiting to hear on that. But that was another thing. Like, even though we do a sound-based podcast, but we're like, we'll do a live stream. So like, we're kind of going on to their show. That's another thing you do is an overlap with other stuff. So basically, for podcasting, I think it's a good idea to just look at, it's like, what is additional things I can do to make them part of the show? Because it's a benefit to you because they'll be more into it, and it's a benefit to them because it's a lot more interesting than just statically being in the background. We got about 5 minutes. Anyone else have any podcasting-related questions? Or YouTube or anything that we basically covered today? There will be a test. You all pass.
I'm a teacher. Don't think he's lying. It's at my house, which is currently in Kansas, Western Kansas.
Wait, are you seriously a teacher?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, he's actually.
Is it so hard to believe that I shape America's youth? I teach physics and physical science. Physical science is freshman, and I teach physics to juniors and seniors. Graduated from Emporia State University. I don't want to brag.
I work part-time at a radio station. Yes, Team Rocket.
Oh, did your school do like a physics first thing? Yeah, Physics First is actually I guess we can kind of cross over to this one. Physics First is if you don't know, this is a program where with schools, traditionally, in a lot of schools, this is the case, they start out with either a physical science or like a biology class. So either a basic super intro science class or a biology, and that's where they start. They figure that because biology has very little math, that it's the easiest one to start out with, but what they don't think about is on a conceptual level, biology is actually one of the more complicated sciences. It relies on a lot of chemistry knowledge, which itself relies on a lot of physics knowledge. So conceptually and fundamentally, physics is actually one of the easier subjects. So what Physics First does is they invert this idea, and no one cares, but I get really nerdy about this, and it introduces, just with no math, conceptually, physics contests. So you teach physics to freshmen, chemistry is your sophomore year, and then junior year you have biology, and then your last one would be like an elective. So you can take a super algebra math-based physics class like the one that I teach, or like a high biology or a high chemistry. So yeah, long crowbar answer into what I'm saying. We do physics high level because of the view. That's just how they do it at my school districts.
Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome.
All right, now you can ask pretty much any question. It's not inappropriate. We're not an 18-plus panel, so don't be that person. So just ask those questions that you think we would talk about on the podcast or whatever. Yep.
What am I dressed as?
We talked about it at the beginning of the panel, so we can't tell you now.
Like I said, I am Tomoko Kuriki from Watamote. It's a fantastic anime. You can find it on Crunchyroll. It's about a socially awkward girl trying to be popular at her high school, and it's very awkward and uncomfortable and so darkly funny.
And it's perfect because Jen was the most awkward girl at our high school.
It's true. And Richard Eisenweiss of Kotaku, that's funny, called it the most mean-spirited anime of the year, which it is so not. If he thinks that Watamote is the most mean-spirited anime, he's going to slit his wrists when he sees Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei. I'm just going to say that.
Which is older. It's an older show, isn't it?
Yep.
Random,
Am I wrong?
Random questions. Any questions? We got a few minutes still.
What's
I don't know.
up?
We should let that guy ask a question.
What?
The prettiest girl in school.
Say what?
Where's the prettiest girl?
Am I the
Are you
prettiest
still
girl?
the prettiest girl in school?
But do you claim to be the prettiest girl?
You claim it.
I don't claim to be the prettiest
The
girl
title
in
you
general.
fight for.
Goodness no.
Even prettier than this girl. Choose wisely.
I said I don't claim to be the prettiest girl.
Next question.
Hey, my husband is the prettiest pride in the world.
I'm not going to argue with you in public, sir. Next statement.
What's
Yes.
up?
Have either of you ever committed a felony?
A felony
Never convicted. Next question.
is no.
No. As far as I know, we both have clean
Yeah.
slates.
Now I've thought about it, but what's up?
What are some of the weirdest, not 18 plus things that have come up on your podcast?
I think it's stuff that we've done to ourselves where we get off track. We talked at the beginning, and some of you might have missed it, about F. Scott Fitzgerald's Doc X Illuminati. It's a story that we made up based off of a tangent we got off of. I think it's one of those things where, I mean, sometimes you can get the community or something. Yeah, we're pretty close, but until like they are
They
staring
boot
at
us
me,
out.
we'll just do it.
We'll go for it.
But basically, when you get sidetracked, I think you are the weirdest person you know most of the time.
Yeah.
Um,
Like a lot of it has to do with the episode titles we come up with. Like the thing about
That's right.
Travis Willingham being our opening act, that was completely organic. We were doing an episode, we were reading the Naka Kon schedule to see what we were going to like in there, and then we noticed that Travis Willingham was in this room like 30 minutes before us doing his panel.
Less than that, actually.
Yeah.
Because he went over, which is
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, I don't care. That was hilarious.
Your show will go wherever you take it, for better or
Yeah.
worse. Any other questions, comments, concerns,
Travis Willingham was
complaints?
hilarious. Why isn't he here?
No complaints, actually. You can just be quiet.
Favorite anime? Favorite game?
Yeah. No, we're not
Favorite-
asking you. That's not how this works. This guy's this is his first panel.
I have been meaning to watch Space Dandy. I
How
really
about-
should.
How about we'll just talk about a few things until we get kicked
Least
out.
favorite game that everyone likes, that everyone gets mad at you for saying is a game that you don't like?
What anime are you watching right now?
Me?
Yeah. And
Happiness Charge Pretty Cure. I believe that shouldn't surprise anybody. It's all right. Kill la Kill, another favorite.
I'm watching Kill la Kill and what's the other one? I'm
I
watching?
recently rewatched the entire series run of Rave Master during a couple snow days.
Oh, and a week or two ago, I watched Attack on Titan in like 2 days. Yeah.
I'll stroke you guys for the announcement of the English dubbing for Attack on Titan.
I'd like to see the list, but I'm a dub person. I'll watch stuff subbed first because that's how it works, but I'm not one of those sub purists. So dubs are cool, and I'm glad it's getting released over here that I can support with money.
Yep. I'm excited to hear what comes out of it. Honestly,
Yep.
I'm stoked.
They already have Alexis Tipton in one of the roles now.
Oh yeah, I think they confirmed who was doing the main female lead.
I think so. Yeah. There was a list that was going around, but it was just someone's dream list,
That's
so
right.
that was
It's
a
not
total
official.
fraud.
There's going to be an Attack on Titan live action movie, a Japanese one, in like 2016. I hope that's better than most live action adaptations because that show deserves it.
So,
Did you hear about the Attack on Titan video game for the 3DS?
It looks bad. It doesn't look like the worst thing, but I did watch some gameplay footage, and like that series would make a great video game, and it's not.
Yeah.
The 3DS is like the top selling system right now, so that's why they put it on there.
yeah, get someone like Platinum.
Next gen would
Get
be
someone
nice.
like Platinum to do an Attack on Titan or Kill la Kill game. Oh my god, that would be awesome.
That's a weekly segment we could do. Get Platinum to do X thing that we like because they already make good games. All right, any other topics? Because I don't know when we're about on time here, but I'll keep going. Yes.
What are your favorite and least favorite species in the family
Hemiptera. I'm not a biology guy.
Favorite me, least favorite Jim. Next question. I'm sorry, what did you even say? Houseflies. My answer stands.
It's still me. For least favorite.
I own 2 cats.
Haven't we reached the time?
Just wanted to say that. Yeah, this is the
Haven't
end of the
we?
panel,
Yeah.
so if you have any lingering questions or inquiries, we'll be lingering outside.
Around.
Feel free to ask us anything that wasn't covered or that you may not have thought of now.
If I could just make one final plug, this is a shameless plug that is not for anything that we're doing.
that's a waste.
There's a Kickstarter for something called Dysfunctional Systems. I don't know if any of you are aware of this. It's a visual novel series by a company called Dischan. They released the first episode. The first episode is actually on sale on Steam for 99 cents.
While you talk about that thing, I'm going to hand out cards.
So if
to
you're
people
if you at all enjoy visual novels or just good storytelling in general, check out Dysfunctional Systems on Steam. They're doing a Kickstarter for episodes 2 and 3 because they don't have the funding for the extra stuff, the extra 2 episodes. And I would very appreciate it if everyone would donate to that and make their dreams become a reality so that my dreams of playing another good visual novel can become a reality. So Dysfunctional Systems on Kickstarter, they do good work. The development's coming along great, and please support those guys. I would be very grateful to have more stories like that in my life. So thank you for letting me waste your time like that.
All right, thanks everyone.
So thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just going to hit
What
stop.
happened to your singing, Jim? You promised
Oh!
singing.
That's how we were supposed to scare them out, wasn't
Jim,
it?
this panel's over. Get everyone out of here.
All right, well, they've been laughing since I can remember.
Oh, yeah?
But they're not gonna laugh anymore.
Not anymore.
No more Maxie the Geek, no more Goof of the Week like before.